Mercy, Isadora had learned, was rarely the absence of punishment. In the mountain packs, mercy was often a story told by whoever held the loudest voice and the cleanest hands, even when those hands had done the staining. A healer could spend years stitching torn muscle, setting shattered fingers, and breathing calm into laboring mothers, then lose all standing in a single night if grief needed a culprit. The pack called that balance. The council called it order. Isadora, dragged through torchlight with iron biting her wrists, called it what it was: fear dressed in law. The birthing chamber still clung to her in pieces she could not scrub away. Hot iron from the blood-warmed braziers, crushed lavender underfoot. The sharp medicinal bitterness of moonroot where no moonroot should ever have been. She had noticed that scent one heartbeat too late. And then Luna Marin's breathing had turned ragged, her pulse racing under Isadora's fingers as voices erupted all around the bed. "She dosed her," Victor Windrider had shouted, already holding up Isadora's satchel as though he had plucked truth itself from leather straps. "I saw her hand in the oil. She killed the air out of spite." His voice had filled the chamber before Isadora could even form the first denial. She remembered the way everyone moved then, not toward the Luna, but toward accusation, as if blame were more urgent than breath. Two guards had seized her shoulders. Someone had struck her across the mouth when she tried to reach for Marin again. "She is lying," Isadora had said through copper on her tongue. "Check the oil basin, check the wick tray. Please, check them now." No one listened. By dawn, the council had convened in the fortress yard beneath banners stiff with old weather. Isadora knelt on wet stone, hands pinned behind her, while the lower packs crowded the tiers to watch a healer become a warning. Snowmelt dripped from gargoyle mouths high on the wall and struck the flagstones with patient, indifferent rhythm. Elder Corvin's voice carried in formal cadences meant to sound impartial. Isadora Frostborn, once sworn healer of Windrider territory, stands accused of oath-breaking, poison use in a birthing rite, and deliberate line-ending harm against the Luna household. "I did not poison anyone," she said. Her throat felt flayed raw. Moonroot was planted. I smelled it only when the contractions turned. Let me examine the oils in front of witnesses. Murmurs shivered through the watching pack. Some faces looked away. Others watched with thin, avid interest. Victor stood to Corvin's right, cloak immaculate, jaw set in practiced grief. He let his gaze settle on her with a sorrow so convincing it nearly made her choke. "Formerly bonded to the accused," Corvin continued, "Victor Windrider has renounced all private claim and submitted this matter to public judgment." Private claim. The phrase scraped. Victor had never released what he held, he only changed the chain and called it procedure. "She touched my family with envy in her heart," he said, loud enough for the outer ring to hear. "You all know her barrenness. You all heard her rage when our union ended. How many times did she mutter that fate should be equal?" A woman in the crowd spat near Isadora's knees. "Womb-cursed." The word spread like mold in damp grain. Womb-cursed, oath-breaker, child thief. Each one landed with the weight of hands pushing her down. Inside, her thoughts began to scatter and then snap back into a hard, narrow line. Stay upright. Breathe. Count the steps from dais to gate. If no one will test the evidence now, survive long enough to force a real hearing later. She held that line because everything else hurt too much to hold. She could still feel Marin's sweat-damp palm grabbing hers in panic, still hear the desperate whisper from the labor bed. "Do not let him in. Please, do not let him in." She had looked up, confused, and seen Victor already at the threshold, smiling. The sentence came before noon. Exile through the lower pass, permanent removal from all healer rights, iron restraints keyed to dampen wolf scents, and public branding as unsafe to touch expectant mothers. The blacksmith heated the irons in full view. 2 guards hauled her to the punishment stones where so many decrees had been made flesh. "No," she said, when they forced her hands flat. "You need these hands intact if you want me gone alive. Bind me, fine, but if you crush the joints, I will lose function." One guard hesitated. The other tightened his grip until her shoulders screamed. Victor stepped closer, crouched, and spoke softly enough that only she could hear. "You should have stayed useful," he said. "Quiet women live longer." Then he stood and said, "For everyone, do not break them. Let her remember what she can no longer do." The iron cuffs locked around her wrists with a dull final click. Runes etched along the inner bands pulsed once, cold as riverstone, and the familiar field of scents around her dimmed to a cramped tunnel. Cedar, ash, wet fur, old fear. No moonwind layering, no fine threads to parse emotion from sweat. Half blind in the one sense she had trusted most. By late afternoon, she was chained to a wagon ring with 3 other exiles and 2 silent guards at the rear bench. Wind clawed through the lower pass, carrying sleet that stung the cuts on her knuckles. She flexed her fingers against the iron, feeling tiny tears reopen where the cuffs had rubbed skin raw. Across from her, a broad-shouldered male with a split brow watched her, and then looked away. "Never seen a healer in irons," he muttered. "Never seen a fair trial either," said the woman beside him, bitter and exhausted. One guard struck the wagon wall with his baton. "No talking." The caravan crawled down the switchbacks while dusk thickened. Torches ahead smudged into wavering halos. Isadora tracked every turn by instinct, even muted. Steep drop on the right, narrow choke point near the frost-cracked bridge, then the cedar belt before the border cairns. If she was going to run, that belt would be her only chance. Too much cover for mounted pursuit. Enough ravines to break scent trails if rain came. Rain came hard just past moonrise. The first arrow hit the lead horse with a strangled cry and a spray of mud. The second took a torch from a guard's hand and spun it into darkness. Wolves erupted from the tree line in Windrider colors, cloaks striped charcoal and red, masks tied high over their mouths, not executioners, retrieval. "Hold the healer!" someone shouted. "Victor wants her breathing." The words cracked through her like ice. Not justice, not exile, transport, property. The wagon lurched sideways as horses reared. One exile jumped and vanished down the embankment. The split-brow male was dragged by his chain when the axle bucked, cursing through clenched teeth. A masked raider landed on the wagon rim, blade flashing as he hacked at the central lock ring. Isadora twisted away from his grasp, shoulder slamming wood. "She comes with us," he snarled. "Do not mark her face." She drove her cuffed hands up under his chin with all the force she had left. He reeled back. Another grabbed her braid and yanked. Pain burst white behind her eyes, but it gave her angle. She dropped, kicked the loose lantern at his knees, and rolled beneath the wagon as steel rang above her. Mud swallowed her to the elbows. She clawed forward, blind, iron scraping stone, while boots pounded on either side. Someone grabbed her ankle. She kicked, felt contact, heard a grunt. Then the wagon shifted as a horse broke free and slammed sideways, opening a gap in the melee. Run now. No second chance. Move. She sprinted downslope into cedar shadow, chains clashing softly with each stride. Rain pelted her face and turned the ground slick. Twice she nearly went down. The dampening runes throbbed against bone, blurring every scent into wet bark and smoke, but she still found the old hunter paths by memory, left at the forked cedar over the root shelf, through the narrow cut where thorn vines hung like wire. Behind her, voices split and multiplied. "Track her." "This way, I saw movement." Victor said alive. That command gave her one small advantage. They would tackle, not kill. Restrain, not spear. She used it, taking risks she would never take against true assassins, cutting across exposed rock where her feet skidded, then dropping into a washout channel where rainwater tore at her calves. Branches whipped her cheeks. Her breath came ragged and burning. By the time the storm crossed into full thunder, her legs shook uncontrollably. She had lost the shouts, then found them again faint and distant, then lost them for good. No triumph followed, only hollow momentum. One foot, then the next. The abandoned watchtower rose out of the trees just before she collapsed, a black tooth of stone leaning against the sky. She remembered it from patrol maps, decommissioned after the northern raids, its stairwell half fallen and roof caved on the west side. Shelter enough if the upper platform held. She made it to the doorway and dropped to her knees. Rain hammered the broken arch. Her fingers would not close properly anymore. The cuffs felt fused to skin. Present tense panic flooded her mind with brutal clarity. If they find me now, this is where it ends. I will be dragged back in chains and called willing. I will disappear inside his house, and no tribunal will ever see me again. I cannot let that happen. I cannot. She pressed her forehead to cold stone and forced herself to breathe in counts of 4 the way she taught laboring mothers in crisis. In, hold, out, again. A boot scraped gravel beyond the threshold. Isadora jerked upright, snatched a jagged shard of fallen masonry, and turned toward the doorway with her back to the wall. A man stood in the rain, taller than the arch should have allowed, shoulders wrapped in a travel cloak dark with water. A scar ran from his left temple into his beard, pale against storm-browned skin. Runes burned faint gold along his forearm where his sleeve had torn. When he looked at her, amber bled through his irises. Not a trick of torchlight because there was no torch, only lightning. He did not step closer. He held both hands where she could see them and said, low and startled, "Isadora Frostborn." She had not spoken her name. Isadora tightened her grip on the stone shard until the broken edge bit her palm. "You have the wrong woman." Rain striped down his face and caught on the scar near his temple. He looked as if he had been carved from old oak and weather, broad through the chest, still as a guard post. Yet there was nothing lazy in the way his weight balanced over the balls of his feet. Fighter, veteran, predator holding his own restraint on a short leash. "No," he said. "I have the right woman in the wrong chains." His gaze dropped to the iron locked around her wrists, to the council runes pulsing dull blue against a braided skin. Something tightened in his jaw. "Who keyed those dampeners?" She laughed once, thin and sharp. "If you know my name, you know who." "Windrider." "Then we are done talking." She pushed herself up, swayed, caught the wall, and tried to edge toward the broken stairwell where she might gain height, and maybe one more minute if he lunged. He did not move to block her. Instead, he stepped aside, opening the doorway wider, exposing the rain-black slope behind him and the dark line of cedars below the tower. That choice unsettled her more than a grab would have. Men who meant to own you did not grant exits. "I am not with Victor," he said. "If I were, you would already be tied and gagged." Comforting. It is honest. His voice roughened around the edges as if he was fighting something in himself and disliked losing ground. "You crossed the cairn ridge 2 gullies back. This tower sits under Silvermane watch. Windrider hunters entered my border an hour ago. 2 are already in my holding cave and deciding whether they prefer silence or teeth. You are not leaving with them." Lightning flared, throwing hard silver over the stone floor. In that brief brightness she saw the insignia stitched at his cloak clasp, a crescent over a wolf's head, rendered in tarnished thread. Not Windrider red, Silvermane steel. Her heartbeat stumbled, then kicked harder. She had not reached neutral wilderness. She had run into another Alpha's territory, and this one knew exactly who she was. From the lower path came a whistle, short and coded. The man answered with 2 clipped notes through his teeth. Shapes moved between the trees, 3 wolves in human form, lean and armed, cloaks beaded with rain. They halted at the threshold when they saw her, eyes narrowing at the irons, then flicking to the man as if waiting for command. "Hold perimeter," he said, without looking away from Isadora. "No one enters." One of the sentries hesitated. "My lord, the Windrider trackers are circling north. If this is the healer they named, she is under my protection." The words landed like stone blocks set in mortar. "Repeat it." The sentry bowed his head. "Under your protection." "My lord." The title scraped across her nerves. She had heard stories in lower pass camps, half rumor, half warning, about a Silvermane war leader who had vanished after the northern betrayals and returned with half his face scarred and his rank unclaimed, ruling from shadow while elders squabbled over ceremony. No one agreed on his age. No one agreed on his temper. Everyone agreed that Pax stopped raiding when his scouts appeared on ridge lines. The sentries melted back into rain. The tower swallowed the sound of their boots. Isadora stood with her shoulders pressed to stone, chest heaving, shard still raised, and understood she was shaking too hard to throw straight. He saw it. Of course he saw it. "You are dropping heat fast," he said. "Hands are cramping. Your left pupil is slower. Either you took a knock to the head or there is poison still in your system. I need your pulse. I need distance. You have it." He sank to one knee, putting himself lower than her blade hand, palms open on his thighs. "I will not touch you without consent. If you refuse, I will bring water. Cut those cuffs when I can and stand guard until dawn. If you permit one check, I can tell you whether your heart is failing from toxin or exhaustion." Her thoughts fractured and reformed into hard, present tense fragments, each one loud as a drumbeat. He is kneeling. No one kneels to me now. This is theater. It has to be theater. And if I trust the wrong breath, I am finished. I can still run. I can barely stand. His men called him my lord. That means chain of command. Command means possession. Possession means a room with no windows. And Victor smiling at the door. Do not be fooled by a calm voice. Do not be fooled by open hands. Yet he told them to stay out. He did not flinch from my weapon. He named the symptoms right. He noticed my pupil. He noticed. Gods, I am so tired. If poison is still moving, I will seize before sunrise and hand them my body without a fight. Choose. Choose now. Live long enough to hate this tomorrow. Her arm dropped an inch. "One check," she whispered. "Only the wrist. If you try anything else, I take your eye." A crooked, almost disbelieving smile tugged at his mouth, gone as quickly as it came. Fair terms. He moved slowly, every motion telegraphed. When his fingers settled against the inside of her wrist, two calloused points over her pulse, the world snapped taut like a drawn bowstring. Heat streaked up her arm, not pain, not fever, something brighter and older, a live current racing wrist to throat and fanning behind her ribs. The dampening cuffs shuddered and gave a sharp metallic whine. Silver light, thin as threads at first, spilled across the scars at her forearm and leaped to the rune burns under his torn sleeve. It braided once, twice. The air smelled suddenly of pine smoke, winter iron, and rain hitting sun-warmed stone, though there was no sun, only storm. He jerked back as if struck, breath tearing out of him. Amber overtook his irises, flooding outward until his gaze looked lit from within by something feral and ancient. One word broke from him, hoarse and involuntary. "Mine." The shard fell from her hand and clattered across stone. Silence crashed into the space between thunder rolls. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Isadora could hear two heartbeats pounding in rough unison, one in her chest, one a pace away, matching and matching and matching until the rhythm became unbearable. No, no, not this. Not now. Her severed bond scar, the invisible wound Victor's counterfeit tether had left when she tore herself loose, flared like a reopened cut. Hunger and grief and rage collided so hard she swayed. For one dizzy second she wanted to step toward him, press her forehead to his throat, breathe until that impossible rightness settled. In the same second, panic tore through the want. New bonds over raw tissue failed. Everyone knew it. They frayed, corrupted, snapped back into madness. If this was real, it could kill them both. If it was another trick, it would kill only her and take him with her. He had gone rigid, fingers spread at his sides as if holding himself together by force. When he spoke again, the rough, possessive note was gone, replaced by discipline stretched thin. "Isadora, look at me." She was already looking, could not stop. Something in his eyes had shifted beyond color, predator surfacing behind restraint, but not at her, around her, guarding. "I am Bastian Silvermane," he said. I should have said it first. A pulse jumped hard at his throat. I felt it too. You think? Her laugh came out ragged, half a sob. Your voice just tried to claim me in one word. I know. He closed his eyes briefly, opened them, and deliberately leaned farther back to give her space. I am not claiming you. Not now. Not ever without your clear consent. Thunder rolled over the roofless west wall. He waited it out, then continued, softer. There is a prophecy tied to my line. If I mark my mate under a blood moon before the bond stabilizes, she dies. I have lived with that sentence in my head for 10 years. I am not going to gamble your life because instinct roared once in a ruined tower. The floor seemed to tilt. Prophecy. Mate. Blood moon. Her knees buckled and he lunged on reflex, then stopped himself mid-motion so sharply she saw the effort carve across his face. May I help you sit? She nodded. He came in at an angle she could track, one hand under her elbow, the other hovering near her back without contact, until she shifted and gave permission with a small sound. He eased her down against the inner wall and retreated to arm's length. Outside, boots splashed in mud. One sentry called that the north trail was clear. Bastian answered without taking his eyes off her, voice returning to command. Rotate to East Ridge. No fires. No one enters. The response came immediately. Steel in structure. She thought wildly. Men who obey because they trust, not because they fear a beating. Her pulse still hammered where his fingers had touched. Warmth pooled low in her chest, unsettling and undeniable. Awareness prickled along her spine as if every nerve had been restrung. She could smell him even through rain and old stone, cedar smoke, leather oil, wolf, and a metallic hint of old magic. The dampening runes had narrowed her world all night. Now, around him, details rushed back in bright shards. This cannot be real, she said, mostly to the wall. I cut one bond to survive. I do not have enough of me left for another. Bastian's expression altered at that, surprise giving way to grim comprehension. He forced a tether. She met his gaze again and saw, with a frightening stab of relief, that he believed her before evidence. Yes. His mouth hardened. Then we proceed with law and proof, not instinct. You stay here tonight under sanctuary terms. At dawn, I summon a border tribunal with Moonwater. If Windrider contests, he does it in the open. She searched his face for the hidden hook, the claws where debt became leash, found none. And if I refuse sanctuary? Then I station 2 of my wolves at the tree line and let you walk. His eyes, still bright amber at the edges, held hers without blinking. I will not cage you to keep you alive. I will keep you alive if you let me. The words hit harder than the bond surge. Not because they were tender, because they were precise. Choice offered without performance. Rain drove harder through the broken arch, wind carrying the distant howl of wolves repositioning along the ridge. Isadora pressed her cuffed wrists to her sternum and felt the iron vibrate faintly against the new thread humming under her skin. Fragile, luminous, dangerous. Bastian remained on one knee across from her, soaked, breathing carefully as if one wrong inhale might shatter what had just begun. When lightning lit the tower again, their eyes locked, and neither looked away. Then Bastian blinked first, as if choosing discipline over gravity, and stood in one smooth motion that kept his body between her and the door without crowding her. "You are soaked through," he said. "If your temperature drops further, no law will matter by dawn. May I bring water and a dry wrap?" Isadora's answer caught behind a knot in her throat. She gave the smallest nod. He crossed to a travel pack near the broken stair and unrolled it on the floor where she could see every item he touched. A flask, a folded wool shirt, a strip of clean linen, a tin cup dented along one side, 3 waxed packets tied with leather cord, a narrow bone-handled knife. Nothing hidden. No chains. No binding hooks. He poured water into the cup, then held it near a flat heating stone he had banked with ember coal under ash, patient as winter. "You keep embers in a ruined tower?" she asked, suspicious despite herself. "One of our patrol rests here every 3rd night," he said. "Storm caches. Salt? Flint? Dry wool." He tested the cup against his wrist, then stopped 3 paces away. "May I set this beside you?" "Yes." He knelt, set the cup within reach, and retreated to his earlier distance. Even now, even with the bond humming like a struck wire under her skin, the water was warm enough to sting cracked lips. She drank too quickly and coughed, spilling some over her wrists. Bastian did not flinch toward her. He waited until she steadied, then held up the linen. "You have dried blood ground into your knuckles. If it seals dirt under the skin, your hands will swell by morning. I can talk you through cleaning them yourself, or I can do it. Your choice." She stared at him. Men did not ask that question in her world. Men announced what would happen and called her difficult if she protested. "You can do it," she said at last, then added with brittle defiance, "if you keep where I can see you." "I will." He shifted onto the floor in front of her, not the stone ledge at her shoulder, not any place that trapped her line of movement. He wrung the linen in warm water and touched her first knuckle with feather-light pressure. Every motion was deliberate, narrated under his breath before he made it. "Turning your hand now." Lifting this finger. "There is grit here. It may hurt." It did hurt, a sharp, humiliating burn, but he never once used force when patience would do. Mud streaks dissolved. Dried blood loosened. The skin beneath was swollen, scraped, and mapped with old healer calluses that the council had tried to turn into evidence of guilt. As he cleaned, she studied his forearms. Rune-burn scars crossed them in angled lines, old silver white against skin. Not ornamental. Battle marks from binding work or command rites gone wrong. "Who burned you?" she asked before she could stop herself. His mouth thinned. "A council that preferred obedient wolves over living ones." He glanced up, amber still ghosting at the rim of his irises. "Different mountain, same habit." By the time he finished, her hands trembled less. He dried them, then sat back and opened one waxed packet. Inside lay field herbs wrapped in oiled paper, rough cut and mislabeled in charcoal. "I need your judgment," he said. "These are what my patrol medics carry when winter closes passes. We lose too many to bad dosing and brave guesses. Teach me what to keep, what to burn." She almost laughed at the absurdity. "You found me in irons and asked for a lesson." "I found a healer in irons," he corrected quietly. "Those are not the same thing." He passed each packet toward her without letting his fingers brush unless she moved first. Yarrow, clean. Comfrey root, usable if boiled long. Willow bark, old but serviceable. A brittle clump of feverfew that smelled wrong. "This one is useless," she said. You dried it near smoke. It turned bitter and unstable. Bastian lifted one brow. That explains an old disgrace. Despite the ache in her chest, she looked up. What disgrace? 3 winters ago, I mistook feverfew for garnish in a camp stew and convinced 20 warriors I had discovered a new culinary weapon. No one died. My rank did not survive the night. The corner of her mouth twitched before she could stop it. The sound that escaped her was not quite a laugh, but it was close enough to surprise them both. He did not press the moment. He only nodded once as if honoring a fragile truce. By the time the storm thinned to hard drizzle after midnight, he had repacked the herbs according to her instructions, separating what to keep from what to discard. He tucked the ruined bundle into the fire and watched it curl to ash. No half measures, he said. If it can harm, it goes. Exhaustion pulled at her spine. He spread the wool shirt across the least broken section of floor and stepped back. You need sleep. I will take the threshold. There is room on the ledge, she said, testing him without meaning to. And there is a door between you and the world, he replied. I prefer useful positions. She lay down with her back to the wall, cuffs still biting, the borrowed wool scratchy against bruised skin. Bastian settled by the entrance, one knee raised, forearms resting loosely over it, gaze tracking rain and darkness beyond. He did not remove his boots. He did not close his eyes. Sleep came in jagged drops. The birthing chamber returned in fragments. Marin's hand slipping from hers. Victor's shout. The satchel lifted high, the crowd turning as one. She jerked awake with a gasp, heart battering her ribs, palms slick. The tower spun around her in wet stone and old smoke. Bastian was already there, not touching, just close enough that his voice reached without strain. You are in Silvermane Watchtower. Rain. East Ridge secure. No one crossed. Her breathing refused to slow. She pressed cuffed hands to her mouth as if she could hold herself together by force. Present tense terror flooded her in merciless clarity. I am back on the punishment stones. I am kneeling and they are naming me monster, and no sound I make matters. If I close my eyes, I see her. And if I remember wrong, then maybe they were right. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I killed her. Maybe I deserve the iron. Maybe this calm voice is another trap, and I am too tired to see it. I cannot drown in memory. I cannot. He lowered himself to sit on the floor, back against the opposite wall, keeping the same careful distance. Count with me, he said. 4 in, 4 hold, 6 out. She hated that the command helped. She hated needing anything from anyone. Still, she matched him breath for breath until the shaking eased enough to unclench her jaw. After a long silence, he spoke, eyes on the doorway. When they branded me unfit for command, they took my name from the war rolls and gave my victories to cleaner men. I kept fighting anyway. Out of spite at first. Then for wolves who deserved better than counsels with polished lies. His voice roughened, then steadied. No one owns your hands, Isadora. Not a former mate, not a counsel, not fear. Her eyes burned. She looked down before he could see it and failed to keep the break from her voice. You say that like law? It should have been. He repeated the sentence once more, softer, until it settled somewhere deep and stubborn inside her, where accusation had lived too long. No one owns your hands. Dawn came as a pale band through cloud, turning the rain to silver threads beyond the arch. Bastian rose, rolled his shoulders as if setting armor she could not see, and signaled the ridge with a low call. 2 sentries answered. Tribunal ground is 20 minutes east, he told her. Border stone, Moonwater Basin, witness rings. I sent summons before first light. He hesitated. You can walk beside me, behind me, or not at all. Decide on the path. Beside, she said, surprising herself. The border tribunal sat in a hollow between cedar and black granite, old law cut into standing stones, worn smooth by generations of fear and bargaining. By second light, elders from 3 packs ringed the basin in layered cloaks, their attendants bearing tablets, lash rods, and ceremonial chains. Windrider colors appeared at the edge of the crowd, too many to be accidental. Elder Corvin stood with his hands tucked in his sleeves, expression carved from sour patience. "You bring an accused poisoner onto neutral ground without restraints fit for scent risk," he said to Bastian. "This is contempt." Isadora's dampeners were still locked, but 2 wardens stepped forward anyway, raising scent-binding chains etched with suppressor runes. One reached toward her throat. Bastian moved faster than she had seen a man his size move. He stepped between them, palm out, aura flaring so sharply the nearest warden stumbled back. "You will not collar her." Corvin's mouth tightened. "Stand aside." "Invoke Clause 7 of the Mountain Accords," Bastian said, voice carrying across the stones. "Any accused healer retains intact senses and unbound throat until trial by Moonwater, lest testimony be coerced and diagnostic capacity impaired. You know this law." A murmur rolled through the rings. Corvin lifted one hand. Clause 7 was suspended in wartime. "By vote of tainted wardens," Bastian said, "reinstated after Frost Famine, recorded by your own clerk." Corvin nodded to the lash-bearer before Isadora could parse his intent. The first strike cracked across Bastian's back, leather weighted with silver beads. He did not move. The second landed lower. He grunted once, then kept speaking through clenched breath. "Sanctuary stands." The third strike cut his cloak and darkened the fabric beneath. Still he held position, broad frames shielding her from chain reach, eyes fixed on Corvin with a calm that felt more dangerous than any snarl. "Strike again," Corvin said, and uncertainty crept under the command. Before the lash could fall, an older female from the outer ring stepped forward, slate tablet in hand. "Recorded," she said sharply. "Clause 7 active at current date. Additional punishment would violate tribunal procedure." She did not look at Isadora when she added, "Proceed by law, or dissolve this hearing." Corvin's jaw flexed. "Proceed." Bastian exhaled once, controlled, and shifted just enough for Isadora to step into view without losing his protection. "State your test," he said. Her mouth went dry, but his stillness anchored her. "Recreate birthing chamber conditions," she said, voice shaking only at the edges. "Same ceremonial oil, same wick heat, same moon water. If moonroot was absent, the mixture stays clear. If present, it blooms bitter blue under heat." A Windrider warden scoffed. "Tricks." "Then witness the trick," Bastian said. Corvin signaled for the official oil casket, sealed with council wax. Isadora watched the attendant break it. She caught a sharp note under the rose blend as soon as the stopper lifted, faint but unmistakable, the medicinal bitterness that had haunted her sleep. Not strong enough for obvious poison. Strong enough to trigger hemorrhagic collapse in labor. She asked for a clean spoon, a flame, and moon water from the tribunal basin. Corvin tried to assign a warden to pour. Bastian cut in. "Let the accused handle the vessels. If she sabotages, she does so in front of all." Permission was granted with visible reluctance. Her fingers trembled as she measured drops into the bowl. She breathed once, twice, then heated the spoon over flame and let the warmed metal kiss the oil surface. For a suspended heartbeat, nothing changed. Then blue veining feathered outward like frost under glass, brightening into undeniable lines that coiled through the bowl. The ring of witnesses erupted. "Moonroot. By the goddess." Sealed casket. Council mark intact. Corvin stepped forward, face gone, ash pale. "Contamination after sealing." Isadora met his gaze and heard her own voice sharpen into the instrument it had always been. "Moonroot does not dissolve clean in rose oil unless ground with salt ash." Salt ash was used in chamber braziers that night. Whoever prepared this blend knew birthing protocol and dosage windows. She set the spoon down with precise care. This was not panic. This was design. Silence fell in hard layers. Even Windrider wolves looked unsettled now, their certainty fraying at the edges. Bastion turned slightly, enough that only she heard him. You did that. Not praise, recognition. For the first time since the punishment stones, Isadora felt the crowd's gaze shift from condemnation to reckoning. It was not safety yet. It was not absolution. But it was a crack in the wall. Corvin called for adjournment to verify records and summon additional testimony. No one touched her as the rings broke apart. No chains were raised. When the hollow finally thinned, Bastion stood beside her with blood seeping through the slashed back of his cloak, posture still unbent. You are shaking, he said quietly. I am angry, she answered. A shadow of a smile touched his mouth. Good. Anger keeps edges sharp. She looked at him, at the lashes he had taken rather than let iron close around her throat, and made a choice that felt small and enormous at once. She lifted her hand, paused until he gave a tiny nod of permission in return, then laid her fingers against his wrist above the rune scars. His pulse jumped under her touch, steady and alive. Beside, she said again, more certain now, and this time she did not let go first. Bastion turned his hand and closed his fingers lightly around hers, not trapping, only answering. And together they stepped out of the tribunal ring while the last witnesses argued in knots around the Moonwater Basin. Gravel shifted under their boots. The cedar wind carried wet stone, ash, and the sour lift of fear from wolves who had watched certainty crack in public. They had almost reached the tree line when a Silvermane sentry descended from the ridge at a run, breath sawing, cloak torn at one shoulder. He dropped to one knee before Bastion and held out a waxed tube sealed with Windrider red and Council black. Intercepted at the South Cairn, he said. Courier resisted. He is alive and bound. Bastion took the tube, offered Isadora a questioning look, and broke the seal where she could see. The parchment inside was written in 3 different hands, formal lines stitched together to mimic authority. Corvin's mark sat at the bottom. So did 3 warden sigils she recognized from the tribunal ring. By order of emergency accord, custody of accused healer Isadora Frostborn is remanded for immediate reclamation assessment under prior bond claim to be enacted at Blood Moon Witness Platform for public stability. Her skin went cold despite the climb. Prior bond claim, she repeated, the words hollow in her mouth. He is trying to revive it in front of everyone. Bastion read the final line and his jaw hardened. He petitioned for a reclamation right. Corvin signed provisional approval pending censure review. He handed her the parchment. This was written before your oil test. Then the test never mattered to them. She scanned the margins again and stopped at a small notation in cramped script. Dormant tether confirmation requested. Ritual specialist standing by. This mattered, she said, tapping the phrase. They are not talking about law. They are talking about mechanism. Bastion's gaze sharpened. Explain. She forced her breathing steady. When Victor first bound me, he used blood coercion and called it mating necessity. I thought I tore it out when I severed. But there are ways to leave a knot dormant in scar tissue, like barbs under skin. If he has a ritual specialist and a blood moon amplification window, he could try to trigger command pathways through what remains. The words tasted like rust. If that knot catches your new bond line through me, backlash could hit your wolf heart. For one heartbeat, raw fury crossed Bastion's face, old and lethal. Then discipline returned, colder than anger. Bring the courier, he told the sentry. They questioned the captured male in a rock cleft above the hollow, out of earshot from lingering elders. He wore Windrider colors under a neutral travel cloak and a council token he had no right to carry. Isadora stood in front of him with the intercepted order in hand, while Bastion leaned against the stone to her left. Still, watchful, and bleeding slowly through his slashed cloak. "Who drafted the reclamation petition?" Isadora asked, "and who is the ritual specialist?" The courier spat blood from a split lip and laughed through swollen pride. "You think names will save you?" Bastian did not raise his voice. "Answer her." The courier looked from Bastian's eyes to the runes on his forearm and seemed to understand at last that silence would not protect him. "Victor drafted it. Elder Corvin amended it. Wardens Hale, Rusk, and Bren countersigned for security." He swallowed. "Specialist is Tovin Greycliff, old bondsmith from the Valley Pits." Isadora's stomach clenched. She remembered Greycliff from apprentice days, a man expelled from healer ranks for blood techniques he called efficient. "And the ledger," she pressed. "The Moonroot ledger Victor hid." The courier hesitated, then dropped his gaze. "In the lower fortress archive, locked beneath birthing records. He plans to produce it at platform and say it proves you ordered supply transfers." He lifted his bound wrists in a helpless twitch. "He says once you are remarked in public, no one will question where the ink came from." There it was, stripped of ceremony. Not grief, not justice, not even vengeance in the hot sense. Possession as political architecture. Reclaim the woman he branded, break the rival Alpha through her body, and crown himself on the narrative of restored order. Bastian pushed off the stone. "Take him to Holding Cave. No broken bones. I want him speaking at dawn." When the sentries hauled the courier away, silence expanded around them, filled only by wind threading the cedar tops. Isadora kept staring at the phrase "dormant tether confirmation" until the letters blurred. Present tense fear crowded in, bright and ruthless. "He built a lock inside me years ago and waited for the right moon to turn it. If I stand on that platform, he will call it law, and everyone will watch my body betray me. If I run, he calls me guilty and starts war with my name as banner. If I stay beside Bastian, I become the blade aimed at his heart. There is no harmless choice left. There is only triage." Bastian stepped closer, close enough that his heat reached her through wet cloth, and stopped there. "Look at me." She did. "Victor is the threat," he said. "Not you, not your scar tissue, not your survival reflexes. We build this as a campaign, not a panic." She wanted to believe him. The wanting itself frightened her more than the threat. By late afternoon, rain had thinned to mist, and they were back in the ruined watchtower with maps spread over a crate, patrol markers pinned with knife points, and the intercepted order weighted under Isadora's bone needle case. Bastian had finally let her cut away the torn back of his cloak. Lash welts crossed his shoulders in dark rising lines, angry but clean. She knelt behind him on the tower floor and worked warm infusion over the injuries while he outlined routes to the lower fortress archive. "Greycliff will ward the official doors," he said, voice tight when her fingers found a deeper welt. "If Victor is staging a public rite, he will also stage discovery. He wants the ledger to appear like revelation, not retrieval." "Then we take it first," she said, "not to hide it. To submit it before he can frame it." He angled his head, listening. Who can authenticate chain of custody besides Corvin? Isadora tied off the salve cloth and sat back on her heels. "Archivist Nera, she logged birthing stores before my exile. She hates Victor because he replaced her son in Gate Command after the northern raids." A hard memory surfaced. She also notices everything. If numbers were altered, she kept ghost copies. Bastian turned enough to meet her eyes. Amber still rimmed his irises when he looked at her too long, as if the bond kept lighting behind restraint. Can she be trusted with this risk? She can be trusted with records. Trusting me is another matter. Records are enough. The practical answer should have steadied her. Instead, she watched a droplet slide down the line of his throat and had to look away. Attraction was no longer a sudden strike in a ruined doorway. It had become a constant undertow, tender and dangerous in equal measure. Every time he asked permission, every time he made room for her decision, the pull deepened. Every time she felt it, fear answered. Not because he was cruel, because he was not. A scout's whistle cut through the tower gloom. One long, two short. Bastian rose, pulled a dry shirt over his shoulders with a hiss at the movement, and went to the arch. The sentry outside spoke fast, too low for the lower woods to carry. Bastian came back with another folded message, this one bearing full council wax. He read in silence, then passed it to Isadora. Emergency convocation at Ancient Stone Circle under Blood Moon. Public reclamation petition accepted for adjudication in conjunction with poison inquiry. Attendance of accused mandatory. Failure to appear constitutes confession and permits wartime seizure protocols across borders. Pressure, now codified. Attend and risk coercive command in a ritual designed by her abuser. Refuse and hand Victor legal pretext for open raids. He is forcing timing, Isadora said. We have one night. Less. Bastian pointed to the sky beyond the broken arch where cloud had begun to shear thin over the peaks. Moon rises full tomorrow. She folded the summons once, carefully, and set it beside the first order. Then tonight we reach Nera, secure the ledger, and file witness declarations before convocation. She met his gaze. If he tries to trigger the dormant knot, I need full healer rights at Circle. Bowls, needles, moon water, no restraints. You will have them, Bastian said. You cannot promise council behavior. I can promise mine. He said it with no flourish, and that simple certainty moved through her like warmth, finding frozen hands. For a moment she let herself imagine what trust might feel like if it lasted longer than an hour. The image hurt. She held it anyway. They left at dusk with 4 Silvermane guards, traveling light through the lower cedar shelves toward the old granary where Nera agreed to meet them outside official walls. The path narrowed between black rock and root-snarled embankments. Mist pooled in hollows, turning wolf shapes ghost-pale at the edges. Isadora kept beside Bastian as promised, every few steps checking scent and sound through dampened senses that still refused full range. Halfway through the ravine, the night changed. No howl, no warning call. Just a sudden deadening, as if the forest had taken one cautious breath and held it. Then chain nets dropped from the ridge. Silvermane guards scattered on reflex, 2 caught at the shoulders and dragged hard to one knee. Arrows thudded into tree trunks around them, barbed heads wrapped in cloth packets that burst into gray powder on impact. Suppressant ash. Not lethal, but enough to choke senses and slow shift response. Wolves in mixed cloaks surged down both banks, faces masked, movement drilled and coordinated. "Circle up!" Bastian roared. He shifted partially as he moved, claws breaking through fingers, canines lengthening, aura flaring so hot the nearest attacker faltered. He ripped one net line free and shoved Isadora behind him toward a stone outcrop. "Stay on me," he said, and the command held no ownership, only strategy. A masked wolf lunged low with restraint hooks aimed at Isadora's wrists. She pivoted, drove her knee into his midline, and slammed her cuffed hands into his jaw. Another came from the left. One of Bastian's guards intercepted, both crashing into bracken with snarls and grunts. Dust from the ash packets burned Isadora's throat. Her vision narrowed, widened, narrowed again. A voice rang out from the upper bank, amplified by ritual horn. Smooth, familiar. "Victor. Do not scar her," he called. "She needs to stand pretty in moonlight." Rage cut through the suppressant fog like a blade through cloth. Isadora grabbed Bastian's forearm. "He is here." "He is near," Bastian corrected, eyes scanning ridgelines. "Projection horn throws location. Keep moving." They pushed toward the ravine mouth in a staggered wedge, but the attackers were not trying to kill. They were shaping motion, driving them toward a marked clearing ahead where runes had been chalked in a broad ring across stone. Isadora saw the pattern one heartbeat too late. Bond catch lattice. Grey Cliff's work. "Do not step in the ring!" she shouted. Bastion veered hard, but an ash arrow struck his shoulder and he stumbled, boot skidding across the outer chalk line. Blue light flared. Isadora's sternum ignited with a searing pull, as if a buried hook had been yanked by invisible hands. She hit the ground, breath knocked out, palms scraping rock. Victor's voice poured through the horn, velvet over steel. "There you are. Feel that, Isadora? That is what you tore and failed to finish." Pain radiated from old scar tissue under her ribs, then snapped outward along the fragile new thread to Bastion. He dropped to one knee, one hand braced on stone, teeth bared against a sound he refused to make. "No," she gasped, crawling toward him. "Do not lock on me. Break contact." Bastion lifted his head, pupils blown wide, and forced the words through clenched jaw. "I am with you." A second horn note cut the air. Attackers fell back in practiced order, leaving just enough space for dread to settle. On the ridge above, a banner unfurled in Windrider red, visible through drifting ash. Victor spoke again, louder now, so every wolf in the ravine could hear. "Bring her to the Blood Moon Circle willingly, and I release him from the backlash knot. Refuse, and each pull stops his heart a little longer. Choose quickly, healer. Dawn is close, and I am done waiting." Bastion's pulse hammered against her fingers, then skipped. Once. Hard enough that terror went white behind her eyes. The ravine held still around them, poised on the edge of a choice that could ruin everything. Isadora kept her hand on Bastion's pulse and felt the next hitch. Subtle but wrong, like a drumbeat struck off tempo. The blue flare from the chalk lattice faded to embers along the stone. Yet the pull inside her scar tissue remained, a taut, invisible line that tightened whenever Victor spoke through that horn. Around them, Silvermane wolves braced in a rough defensive crescent while masked attackers waited at bow range, disciplined and patient. Not a raid now. A funnel. She rose on shaking legs and lifted her voice toward the ridge. "I will come to the Blood Moon Circle under tribunal law. You touch one of my people again, and I invoke wrongful bond combat rights before the first witness stone." The horn carried Victor's low laugh back down the slope. "You always did sound brave when cornered." Bastion reached for her elbow, caught himself, and let his hand hover until she leaned into it. "Do not bargain from fear," he said, breath tight. "We can cut through East Ravine and—" Another spike of pain tore through the tether scar under her ribs. Bastion folded at the waist with a harsh exhale, fingers clawing rock. Isadora's decision settled in one hard click. Not because she trusted Victor, because she believed the threat mechanics. He had engineered a trigger and already proved he could fire it at distance. Present tense clarity slammed through her, cold and precise. If I refuse, he keeps pulling until Bastion drops. If I run, he names me confessing and turns every border into a battlefield. If I go, I step into the trap where he thinks old terror still controls me. I am done offering my body as his instrument. I am done letting him decide the shape of my choices. I can be afraid and still move. I can break while standing. I can bleed and still set terms. This is not surrender. This is positioning. She faced Bastion fully. "Listen to me. He wants panic. We give him procedure. You call full witness convocation, not private right. Corvin, wardens, outer packs, everyone. You bring the courier from holding cave in chains and make him speak where no one can erase it. You demand healer rights for me at the circle. Bowls, moonwater, my needle kit, no restraints." His eyes searched hers, amber brightening at the edges. "And if they refuse?" "Then they refuse in public." A beat passed. Then he signaled his captain with two sharp whistles and a hand code. Orders rippled through Silvermane lines. Messengers broke from cover and vanished into cedar dark. By the time the first red arc of moon lifted over the eastern ridge, they had crossed the upper trail under armed escort and entered the ancient stone circle from the north path, exactly as law required for contested claims. Torches burned in iron braziers between monoliths carved with old Accord script. Packs filled the terraces in layered ranks, a restless ring of breath, fur, and judgment. Corvin stood at the council dais with a face like carved salt. Beside him, Wardens Hale, Rusk, and Bren wore ceremonial black and avoided looking at Isadora. Victor waited on the execution platform in Windrider crimson, hair bound, chest marked with silver paint in the pattern of reclamation rights. Tovin Greycliff stood one step behind, thin hands inked in bondsmith runes, a smile folded small and mean at one corner of his mouth. At the platform base, bound between two guards, the captured courier watched the crowd with hollow eyes. Bastian guided Isadora to the witness line and stopped. "Final check," he said quietly. "Do you consent to stand this?" "Yes." "Do you consent for me to intervene if anyone breaches accord?" "Yes." He bowed his head once, formal as oath steel. "Then I stand beside you until you tell me otherwise." Corvin struck the stone gong. Public reclamation petition and poison inquiry now convened. Accused healer Isadora Frostborn, step forward for bond verification. Isadora stepped onto the inner ring and raised her cuffed hands. "Remove the dampeners, Clause 7 and healer trial protocol." A surge of murmurs moved through the terraces. Corvin hesitated. Bastian's aura rolled outward, not a threat display, a declaration of rank. "Remove them," he said. The key clicked. Iron fell away from Isadora's wrists with a weighty clang that echoed farther than it should have. Scent and sound rushed back in layered detail so fast she nearly reeled. Torch oil, granite dust, fear sweat from the front ranks, moonwater mineral sharpness from the central bowl, and beneath all of it, Victor's scent threaded with old ash and triumph. Greycliff produced a ritual blade. "Kneel for reclamation marking." Isadora did not move. "No." Victor spread his hands to the crowd, grief performed to perfection. "See how she defies lawful correction. She poisoned my Luna, fled tribunal, and now hides behind Silvermane teeth." Bastian took one step forward. "Courier testimony first." Corvin's mouth thinned, but the crowd had heard. "Bring him." The courier was dragged to the witness stone. Under oathwater and name-call, he repeated what he had told them in the ravine. Victor drafted the petition before the oil test. Corvin amended. Wardens countersigned. Greycliff hired for dormant tether activation. Ledger hidden beneath birthing records for staged reveal. Gasps fractured the terraces. Hale swore and lunged for the courier. Silvermane guards pinned him to the stone. Victor's expression did not crack. "A beaten messenger says whatever keeps his teeth." Isadora moved to the moonwater bowl at circle center. She drew a small stoppered vial from her sleeve seam, preserved sediment she had scraped from the tribunal oil spoon after the blue bloom appeared. She held it high for all to see. "I preserved residue under witness," she said. "Moonroot and salt ash. Tonight I tested against his chest mark." Greycliff snapped. "Irrelevant theatrics. Then you will not mind observation." She poured the sediment into the bowl, stirred once with her bone needle, and felt the water cool to a near-freezing bite. Victor took one step back despite himself. That single retreat traveled through the crowd like lightning. He recovered fast. "Enough games. Begin the rite." "No," Isadora said again, louder. She turned to the witness stones and called in formal cadence older than any current alpha. "I invoke trial combat rights of wrongfully bonded females under Moonwater law. I name Victor Windrider as coercive claimant. I demand truth circle examination before any mark can be placed." Silence dropped hard. Corvin looked to the carved monolith at his left where the statute was etched. He could deny her only by denying the stone. "Granted," he said at last, voice clipped. Truth circle terms apply. Greycliff hissed a curse. Victor's smile thinned to a blade. Isadora drew her own palm across the needle tip and let blood fall into the moon water. The bowl flashed silver white. At the same moment she turned toward Bastian and saw the backlash line twitch along his throat like a tightening wire. No more delay. She lifted her bleeding hand to the fragile bond thread only she could sense between them and spoke the healer's severance rite in the old tongue, each word a cut. The connection tore free with a pain so bright her knees hit stone. A cry ripped from her before she could swallow it. Across the ring, Bastian staggered, then straightened as the constriction around his pulse released. Victor laughed once, disbelieving. You cut your own mate line. I set him outside your reach. Isadora surged to her feet, seized the bowl, and flung the charged moon water across Victor's painted chest rune. Blue fire raced over silver paint and burned through to what lay beneath. Counterfeit tether marks, old blood script knots hidden under cosmetic glyphs. They blazed cobalt against his skin in unmistakable pattern. The terraces erupted into shouts. Forgery. Coercion marks. By moon, he branded her false. Inside the truth circle, Victor's first denial hit him like a punch. He flinched, hand to sternum. Isadora stepped into the ring opposite him, voice steady despite blood running down her wrist. Did you plant moonroot in birthing oil? No. Pain folded him at the waist. He choked and forced himself upright. Did you forge a mating tether with blood coercion? No. The circle convulsed under him. He dropped to one knee, breath shredding. Did Luna Marin tell me to keep you out of the chamber? His face went white. She was delirious. The ring flared. He screamed this time, raw and involuntary. Around them, wolves who had spat at Isadora days ago stared with dawning horror. He surged up with a snarl, half-shift ripping through his posture, claws breaking from his hands as he lunged out of the circle boundary. Bastian moved like a released storm, intercepting the strike with his forearm and driving Victor sideways off balance. Stone cracked under their boots. Isadora was already moving. She closed the distance, bone needle in her good hand, and drove it into the knot point at Victor's sternum where the counterfeit marks converged. White fire burst outward in a ring of sparks that smelled of burnt ink and old fear. Victor convulsed, claws retracting as the forged tether unraveled strand by strand and vanished into ash. He fell to both knees, stripped of claim signature. The terraces went silent enough to hear torch fat hiss. Isadora stood over him, chest heaving, blood and moon water drying on her skin. You called possession love, and you called cruelty fate, she said, voice carrying clean to the far stones. Tonight, the moon names it what it is. Victor spat at the ground between them, eyes gone feral and small. You were mine before he smelled you. Bastian stepped to Isadora's side, gaze locked on Victor with cold finality. She was never yours. Corvin lifted his staff, formal and trembling. Claim stripped, authority void, sanctioned alpha judgment. Victor tried to rise for one last strike. Bastian met him head-on and delivered the sanctioned blow, precise and brutal in its efficiency. The impact snapped Victor backward onto the stones. He did not rise again. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then the first witness knelt. Another followed. Then a wave of bodies lowering across terraces and torchlight, not to Bastian alone, but toward the blood-marked healer standing at circle center with her needle still in hand. Isadora did not kneel. She did not look away. She stood in the moon's red light and felt, beneath pain and shaking and grief, the first solid ground she had known in years. Corvin found his voice first, thin with strain. Cleanse the circle, record all marks before dawn. His gaze flicked to Victor's body, then to the cobalt burns still ghosting his own wardens' faces. No one touches the remains until witness tablets are sealed. Bastian turned, scanning the terraces for the next threat, and Isadora followed his line of sight in time to see Archivist Nera push through the lower ring with 2 slate keepers and a lockbox chained to her wrist. The older woman's braid had come loose in the climb, and she looked furious enough to bite stone. She stopped before the dais, raised the box, and spoke toward the whole assembly. Lower Archive was breached under false council seal 3 times this month. I made duplicate tallies after the first breach. This contains the Moonroot transfer ledger, the original wax strips, and my ghost copies. She cut a glance at Isadora, hard and direct. The entries naming you were added in fresh ink over scraped parchment. I logged the scraping depth. If anyone claims otherwise, they can argue with my knives. A rough laugh moved through the outer terraces, tension finally cracking. Corvin did not smile. He ordered the tablets opened. Nera's lockbox entered into record, the intercepted orders from the South Cairn placed beside it, and Isadora's sediment vial sealed with moonwater residue for later assay. Bastian handed over the 2 forged summonses himself. The courier, still bound, confirmed his statement before 3 scribes and asked for judgment under cooperative testimony law. Corvin granted confinement instead of execution pending full tribunal, a mercy that looked less like kindness than fear of further public lies. Greycliff tried to slip into the crowd. Silvermane sentries dragged him back by both arms and held him for bond crimes inquiry. Hale, Rusk, and Bren were disarmed at the witness stones. When Corvin looked at Isadora again, the old certainty was gone. Moonwater washed the inner ring in silver streams. Wolves moved in ritual sequence, scraping blood from carved channels, relighting braziers, resetting the law stones for lawful claim. Isadora's wrists throbbed where the dampeners had bitten, her palms still bled in a narrow line. Bastian stepped close, then stopped, giving her room to refuse in front of everyone. "Isadora Frostborn," he said, voice low but carrying. "The false tether is destroyed. The coercive claim is void. I ask with witnesses present so no one can ever rewrite this. Do you consent to my mark?" The crux of it landed with startling force. Not whether she loved him, not whether the bond called to her, but whether she would choose a new script after surviving the old one. She took one breath, then another, and lifted both hands to his face. Rain had dried on his skin in pale tracks. Ash dusted his jaw. His pulse jumped fast beneath her thumbs. She bared her throat first, turning her head until the vulnerable line where neck met shoulder lay open to him and to the moon. "Yes," she said, "I consent. Mine by choice, or not at all." His pupils widened, predator and reverence colliding in one expression that made her chest tighten. "By choice," he answered, roughened by feeling, always. He touched her shoulder in warning before his mouth found her pulse point. The bite came sharp, clean, a bright lance of pain that stole her breath and then, almost instantly, transformed. Heat spread from the mark in spiraling waves, not burning this time but opening, as if every locked chamber in her body had been given air. She heard him inhale against her skin, heard a hoarse whisper that was half vow, half wonder. "Mine." The word no longer sounded like seizure or command, it sounded like recognition. Light moved under her skin, warm silver first, then braided gold, racing along old scar pathways and smoothing what coercion had left jagged. She felt Bastian through it, not as pressure, but as presence. His iron discipline, his held-back fury, the tenderness he had hidden behind tactics, the old loneliness of a leader who expected betrayal and kept showing up anyway. Images flickered at bond speed, fragments and truths. His younger self standing over War Dead, his hand hovering beside her in the watchtower because he would not touch without permission. Lash stripes at the tribunal. the exact moment in the ravine when her pain had hit him, and he still chose to stay upright. Isadora swayed and he caught her, arms banding around her waist as the flare crested. When it eased, she pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Amber burned there, but steady, not feral. She slid her hand to his shoulder, found the dense line of muscle above his collar, and waited until he gave the smallest nod. "My turn," she whispered. She bit into his shoulder with deliberate pressure, enough to draw blood and seal, enough to answer him in equal weight. His breath broke on her name. Power answered power. Her mark sank beneath his skin and flared to match her own, mirrored runes locking in warm silver at both pulse points, while the surrounding stones hummed with old law acknowledging mutual claim. A murmur rose through the terraces, then another, wolves repeating the oldest witness words in low unison. "Yours," Bastion said against her temple, voice shaking now. "Mate." "Yours," she echoed. "Mate." Then, softer, for him alone, she pressed her forehead to his and spoke the truth she had carried since the severance. "I set you free, so you could choose me." His arms tightened, careful of her bruises, as if he still expected her to vanish. "I choose you in every life, and this bond answers only us." They stayed like that while the circle finished settling, breathing each other in, feeling the tether stabilize into something quiet and unyielding. No hook, no hidden command, no outside hand on the line. Behind them, Victor's body remained under moonlight until all 4 witness tablets were sealed, formal proof completed as law required. 3 days later, under a clear noon sky that made the fortress banners look newly forged, the exoneration rite filled the great hall from threshold to rafters. Nera stood beside the central table and read each tampered ledger entry aloud before presenting her scraped parchment analysis, then handed Isadora the original birthing records with both palms, a gesture of public restoration. The chamber attendant who had frozen at Isadora's accusation in the first tribunal finally spoke and confirmed Marin's last warning, voice breaking as she repeated it. "Do not let him in." Corvin, stripped of presiding authority pending council review, signed the correction decree without ornament. Hale, Rusk, and Bren were sentenced to labor and witness silence under guard. Greycliff was banished to the valley pits under rune suppression, his bond tools melted in the yard before sunset. The courier received reduced sentence and permanent exile for cooperation. No one contested. When Corvin asked who would hold birthing and bond jurisdiction across the mountain packs, Bastion did not answer first. He stepped back and opened his hand toward Isadora. She walked to the dais in healer gray, her new shoulder mark visible above the collar, and accepted the staff of High Healer with sovereign authority sealed by Moonwater and Pack blood. Then Bastion took the Alpha mantle in the same session, not crowned above her, but beside her, and read the revised protections into law. Sanctuary for accused healers, independent evidence custody, automatic review for coercive bonds, and equal counsel voice for unmated wolves. At the final clause, he turned to Isadora and spoke plainly enough for every tear to hear. Co-ruler, not consort. Her judgment stands equal in council and war. Dawn found them at the rebuilt watchtower weeks later, cedar smoke lifting from new chimneys, herb racks drying along the inner wall where rain once pooled, and 4 orphaned wolf children arguing over who got to carry water to the infirmary hearth. Isadora pretended sternness, reassigned all 4 to bandage rolling, and failed to hide her smile when they saluted like tiny soldiers. Bastion came up behind her with 2 mugs of willow tea and paused at her shoulder, waiting for her lean before touching. She leaned. Below them, the lower pass road lay open and quiet. No retrieval parties, no hunting horns, only traders and patrols moving under shared banners. She set her once condemned hands on the stone parapet, felt his marked shoulder warm against hers, and watched the sun clear the eastern ridge while the realm she had bled for woke in peace.